Hello everyone, welcome back to the course on operating system. Today's discussion will be about the operating system structures, wherein we'll be studying the operating system services, the system calls, the types of system calls and system programs basically, and later we'll be moving on to the basic structures like your MS-DOS, and we'll be studying about the operating system structure, design, and implementation in the further presentations. This is Archana Priyadarshini, Assistant Professor in the Department of ISC, Canada Engineering College. Let's look into the operating system services, user operating system interface, system calls, and the type of system calls. So the main objective of this presentation is to learn the services an operating system provides to the users, processes, and other systems, and also to discuss the structuring of operating systems like simple structure or layer structure and microkernel including modules. We'll also discuss about the system calls and the system programs. So in this slide, we'll be seeing about the operating system services. As you know, operating system it provides an environment for execution, wherein the programs can be executed. So these operating systems they vary greatly in their makeup, since they are organized in different lines, right? So the design of a new operating system is a major task. So what we must know is based on the goals of what the system must provide, what are the services that an operating system does for the users. So we have seen many views of an operating system like user view and system view. From different points of view, how does the operating system structure needs to be, and how it has to be served. So now we'll be seeing the general services that are provided by the operating system to the users. So the specific services they differ from one operating system to another, but basically we are going to classify based on the convenience of the programmer. So the first service that is usually provided by an operating system is user interface. So let's discuss about this user interface. As you know, almost all the operating systems they have a user interface. So this interface will take many forms. One is we can say about the command line interface. One already knows about it, command line interface, which uses text commands and the method for entering them, right? So we'll have a program that allows us to enter and edit the commands. And another such interface that probably users will be using is a batch interface, in which the commands and the directives to control those commands will be entered into files. Okay, all the commands will be entered into files and these files are executed. So that is a batch interface. And lastly, more commonly we know that we have got a graphical user interface. So what is the purpose of this graphical user interfaces? The interface is like just like a window system with a pointing device as we do in our laptops, and this pointing device can direct to the IO and choose specific menus and make selections, and we can use the keyboard to enter the text, right? So listing out once again different types of user interfaces like command line interface, batch interface, and graphical user interface. So coming to the next service that OS usually provides is a program execution. So what is this program execution is? The system must be able to load the program into the memory and it must be able to run that particular program whenever user requires. This program must be able to end the execution. Maybe it tells the user that it has been successfully executed with a particular exit code, or it may say that there is some particular error in the program and so it needs to abort the execution. So all these kind of program execution based errors or success must be intimated to the user, so that comes under program execution. The third service that the operating system is designed to perform is IO operations. Any program which requires an IO may involve a particular file or an IO device. And for specific devices, special functions may be desired, right? For specific devices, like if you want to record to a CD or DVD drive, another operation, some different kind of operations may be required to do this particular task. So users usually cannot control those IO devices directly. Therefore, who has to do this kind of task is the operating system must provide some way in which the users can interact with the IO devices and get back the result or get back to the point where it was executing. Let's see the next service in the next slide. So coming to the next service, that is file system manipulation. So file system, it's of basically we can the programs can be read and written into the files as well as directories, and it's also possible to create a new file or delete them by a particular name, or we can search for a file, and all these things are maintained in a hierarchical manner or in a logical view. It provides a logical view to the users, right? So that was a very simpler way of organization of the directories and files by the operating system. Finally, we may also have, or the users may also ask for the permissions or specific permissions to be allowed to files or directories based on the ownership. So let's say a particular user wants to have access in such a way that he or she can only read the particular file, and only uh, others can only view or execute the file. So specific permissions like that can be achieved with the help of command line to a particular file. So there are, who does all these things is the operating system. This kind of updation or manipulation is done by the operating system over the files, and it's always been triggered back to the file system. So let's say once the user deletes the file, the same update is being given in the directory, in the hierarchical directory. Coming to the next service is the communication. So what does this say is the exchange of information between the process. So such communication, they usually occur between processes that are executing on the same computer. So let me say this, as a client and server process, they both are communicating. So operating system must provide some means of connection. First of all, if user tries to create the connection, operating system must see that the resources are shared between these two endpoints or communicating parties, right? And once the communication is in progress, so it has to see that how the way in which the memory can be shared, or whether it uses kind of message passing or kind of shared memory to accomplish the task. So that is the communications. Coming to the error detection, so here the operating system needs to be aware of the possible errors. So errors may occur in the CPU, or it may occur in the hardware, right? Or it may occur in the IO devices and in the user program. So for each type of error, the operating system should take the appropriate action to ensure that correct and the data will be correct, and it must be in consistent mode, right? So that is the error detection facility provided by the operating system. So let's see other services. The first is resource allocation. So these are different kind of operating system functions that exist for helping the user rather than for the system. I can say basically, right? So first is about resource allocation. So in case if there are multiple users or multiple jobs, if they are running at the same time, so resources must be allocated to each one of them very efficiently, right? If there are different type of resources, who has to manage them is the operating system. Let's say CPU cycles are to be given to a particular user, as well as main memory is to be shared among these users, and also the file storage may happen to be shared among the different users. How it has to be allocated? Okay, if the allocation is done and if the user doesn't want that particular portion of the memory, who has to be allocated the same portion of the memory? All these kind of tasks, resource allocation is done by the operating system. Another example is if you want to determine how best to use the CPU. So operating systems, they basically have this kind of scheduling mechanism, whether the first process has to be allocated to the CPU or the next process. There are certain scheduling algorithms to manage this CPU. So the greater task or the great burden lies in the operating system, who does all these tasks very efficiently for us to access the resources. The next service that operating system is designed to give is the accounting facility. What is meant by accounting is, uh, suppose we want to keep track of what users use which kinds of computer resources. Okay, if you want to keep track of which users use what kind of resources and how much portion of the resources the users are using, so this kind of record keeping is called as accounting. So I think this is clear to you. The accounting means if there are 3 or 4 users, so all the 4 users are using what kind of resources, whether it is CPU or memory, and if they are using CPU or memory, how much percentage of CPU each one of them is using. So the last service is about the protection and security. So, as you know, there will be owners and group, and the owner will maintain, the owners of the information will be stored in the multi-user computer system, wherein they want to control the use of that information. So, when there are several processes which are executing concurrently, so one process should not interfere with others, right? So the data must be consistent. Even if one process tries to intervene with other process, that the effect of this kind of update must be consistent. That means the data must be same throughout after updation. So this kind of protection must be provided by the operating system. So what is protection is, it involves ensuring that all the access to the system resource is controlled. Ensuring that all the access to the system resources is controlled. And security is nothing but, we can say the security from outsiders. Okay, we can say this in terms of security as external attacks. So this security, it starts with requiring that each user has to authenticate himself or herself to the system by means of password. So at the beginning you must have seen the login page when you're supposed to give your password. So this is called as security. Okay, and this kind of security and protection is provided by the operating system in terms of its applications too. So this is an overall view of the operating system services. We have seen so far the services are offered by the operating system, including using interfaces in terms of batch interface or command line interface or GUI. Plus, along with this, it provides a mechanism for communication through system calls. And there are variety of services which are provided by the operating system for the system purpose, that is for program execution, IO operations, file systems, communication, resource allocation, accounting, protection and security, and error detection. So we have seen all these services in the previous slides. You can overall view the operating system where exactly it lies between the hardware and user, acting as an intermediary for communication between the user and the hardware with the help of services and system calls. So let's look into some of the operating system interfaces. First one is about the command interpreter or the command line interface. This allows a direct command entry. That is, we can ask the command interpreter to include some commands and perform a job. Windows XP and Unix treat this command interpreter as a special program that is running when the job is initiated. So in systems with multiple command interpreters, so those interpreters are called as shells. So you must have heard about corn shell, born shell, sea shell, born again shell. Okay, these are the different shells in which the interpreters may work. And if the system consists of all these, if the system consists of these kind of command interpreters, they are called as shells. The main function of the command interpreter is to get and execute the user specified command, right? For example, the user may want to create a file, so he'll write a particular command. User may want to delete a file, and the other operations that may be performed are listing the contents of the file, or printing the specific contents of the file, or copying a file, or executing a file. So all these MS DOS and Unix shells, they operate in this same manner. So what do these command interpreter contain? They actually contain the code in order to execute the command. For example, I have written here rm, that is remove file.txt. So this will load that particular file. That means it will find out where exactly this file resides in memory, and then execute the task or execute the command that is associated with it. Here it is remove. So it will remove the entry from the file directory. That is, it will remove file.txt from the directory. One such shell is been listed here. Here we have used bond shell, and the command interpreter looks like this. There will be a set of commands which are given by the user, and for those commands corresponding result is displayed on the screen. So next kind of user interface is the graphical user interface, which we are all about aware about this currently. And this strategy of interfacing with the computer's operating system is called as the user friendly graphical interface, because users can interact with the system. So instead of typing the commands through the command line interface, what do the users usually like is they employ a mouse based window and menu system, and it is characterized by desktop. So the user can move the mouse to a particular position and then locate on images or icons and perform some task that is associated with the particular program. So he or she may also locate a file or select a file or directory known as folder, and or drop down the menu which contains commands. So this kind of graphical user interface, it is used in our Microsoft Windows too and other operating systems. So in Microsoft Windows, we have got a GUI with CLI command shell, and in case of Apple Mac OS, we have got a Aqua GUI interface with the Unix kernel lying between. And in Unix and Linux, they both have CLI with optional GUI interfaces. So these in various GUI interfaces are actually available. And you have also heard about KD, it's called as a K desktop environment, and Genome desktop. Okay, both the KD and Genome desktop, they run on Linux, and we have got various Unix systems which are available under open source licenses. But the choice of whether to use command line or GUI interface is, it's our personal preference, right? We may also use GUI, or we may like command based interfaces. Who are backend programmers, they usually like command line interfaces. So this kind of user interface, they vary from system to system and even from user to user within a system. So you can observe the various kind of GUI interfaces are displayed in the next slides. So here is a one example of touchscreen devices with different icons, and actions and selections are based on just the gestures. In case of touchscreen devices, you can observe we have also got a GUI here, and without mouse there is a virtual keyboard. You can observe this in your cell phones, and one can also perform search with the help of voice commands. So we have already seen where do system calls lie. They lie between the user interface and the services made by the operating system. So we can say system calls are the interface, or it provides an interface to the services which are made by the operating system. And so these services may be written in terms of routines like C or C++, and we can say that there is some term called as an API, which the programmers basically use, or we can say instead of programmers, the application developers, they design programs according to the application programming interface. So what is this API? This API specifies a set of functions which are available to the application programmer. So it contains parameters which are passed to each function, and maybe return values that the programmers can expect, right? So three of them, most common APIs are Win32 API for Windows, POSIX API for POSIX based systems, and Java API for Java Virtual Machine. So here you can observe that whenever a program is written, that program contacts the library functions, corresponding library functions, and in between it tries to make system calls to contact the kernel for maybe for some memory management or some input output devices. So once the kernel finishes off its task, it sends back the result to the program in terms of display, and then it asks for user response. So one example, let's cite about system calls. Let's say a user has written a simple program to read data from a file and copy them to another file. So what will be the first input that a program usually needs? So first of all, the input to the program will be the names of the two files, right? So one is the input file and one is the output file, because the data has to be copied from source file to destination file. So once these names have been specified, you can specify these names in different ways. So one approach is you can ask the user to type the names of the two files, or maybe by means of system calls, you write a prompt message to the screen and then to read from the keyboard the characters. Okay, in a mouse based icon system, we can display the menu of the file names that are used. So once the two file names are obtained, the program must open the input file and create the output file, right? So each of these operations require different system calls. Maybe there will be error conditions for each operations. Say for example, if the program tries to open the input file, it may find that there is no file of that particular name. or that file is protected against access. So in such case, the program must print a message to the console, and then terminate abnormally. So if the input file exists, then it is easy to create a new output file. So we might find that there is already an output file with the same name. So in such case, it causes the program to abort, or we may delete the existing file and create a new one. So now if the both files are set up, we can enter a loop that reads data from the input file and write to the output file. And each read and write must return the status information, right? So whether it has been read successfully, or what will be the possible error conditions. On input, the program may find that the end of the file has been reached, or there may be a hardware failure in the read operation. Okay, even the write operation may encounter various errors, like there may be no disk space, or out of paper in printer. Finally, after the entire file is copied, the program must close both the files and write a message to the console. So this is the sequence of system calls. For each of the commands, there are system calls. So here you can observe where actually the system calls lie. Outside we have got the user interacting with the applications, and these applications may take several forms, and we use different command interpreters known as shells. And these shell in turn may it usually interacts with the library routines. Whenever a command is written in the command interpreter, it contacts the particular library routines, and maybe for input and output or memory management, it takes the help of the kernel with the help of system calls. So system calls, they are lying inner to the kernel. So more deeply, if you want to understand these system calls, you can observe the hierarchy of the layers of Linux system. Here in the hardware section, you have got all these kind of CPU, memory, disk terminals, and in the OS region, that is in the kernel mode, the OS performs process management, memory management, file system, IO, etc. And the user mode starts from the library routines to the utility programs. So library routines include the maybe the user has called for an open system call, or closed system call, or read, or write, or fork. Okay. And next is the utility program. So what are these utility programs? You might have seen editors, compilers, shell, etc. So these provide the way in which the data can be accessed easily. Okay, so users interact with the help of utility programs. Maybe the user has written the program in an editor, and then for a particular, for each line of the code that is written, it retranslates it to library function, that is in terms of system calls, like open, read, close, or write. Maybe if you have written printf, it contacts the write system call, and then ask for the operating system to have an appropriate memory management or process management for the particular program that is written, and then checks the hardware and returns the result back in these layers to the users. Here you can see the separation of user space and kernel space. Mentioned this very clearly. Say for example, there is a malloc function called in the program by the user, and this malloc, again you can observe that there is an break function. So this once again is another set of code which is there in unistd.h. So the user has to invoke both the header files stdlib and unistd.h, and then which once again has got a trap to sys underscore s break. So this is again a interrupt service routine which is being executed in the particular region, and then which is done by the kernel. Once this task is done, it returns the control back to the user space. So that's why we need a separation from user space to the kernel space. so that all the privileged instructions are executed in the kernel without having any that means it provides some kind of protection to the kernel. So these are the system calls associated for a particular process management. So we have got fork, wait, PID, exit and exit. We also know that these system calls they can be grouped into what is called as a process control, file manipulation or device manipulation, or information maintenance, communications and protection. So in terms of process control, the running program needs to be able to halt the execution either normally or abnormally. That is, it should invoke the end system call or abort system call. So a process of the job that executes one program may want to load and execute another program. So this feature allows the command interpreter to execute a program. For example, may have a user command that clicks the mouse. Okay, appropriate system call is done. So the process may end or abort. The process it is possible for a user to load a job or execute a particular job, right? And if we can also have another system call. Let's say the user has created new job or a new process. So the operating system is going to invoke create process and terminate process kind of system calls. And we can also have the attributes of the particular process being set, and we can also have the jobs being waiting for a particular amount of time. So we can have wait time or wait for the event. So under this section, majorly if we talk about process control, we have got several such system calls apart from these system calls listed here, like fork, wait, PID or exit. So under process control, majorly we have got create process, terminate process, exit process, get process attributes, set process attributes, load a process, execute a process, end and abort. So all these are further system calls pertaining to process control. So next is about the file management. First, we need to be able to create and delete files. So for that, either the system requires the name of the file and some of the file attributes. Once the file is created, we need to open it and use the file. So the operating system invokes appropriate system call called as open. And if the user may also read or write or reposition to a particular position in the file. For that, the operating system calls the lseek function. And finally, the user may want to close a file indicating that it's not no longer used. So you can invoke the close function. The file attributes include the name of the file, file type, protection codes, accounting information, and another system call that can be used is to get the attributes of the file, whether it's read, write, or execute by owner or others or the group. So for that, the respective permissions granted for that file can be obtained with the get file attribute, and the user can also set that file attributes to their own convenience. User system calls can also be applied for directories, wherein the user can create a new directory with the help of mkdir command, and also remove an empty directory with the help of remove rmdir, remove directory command, and can also link the two files pointing to the name one, that is link file 1 to file 2 and then next he can also unlink the particular file. You need to give the appropriate file name, and there is also a mount system call which can mount the file system to mount a file system, and also we have got permission to unmount the file system. Talk more about the system call implementation. Basically, the user need not know how the codes are written pertaining to system call. Just the user need to invoke the appropriate interface. For example, the user has written the printf function, and any call associated with the printf needs not be understood by the user. All these functions are done automatically by the operating system. So we know that whenever we write a printf function, it invokes the appropriate write system call, and with the help of the hardware it tries to communicate between the user and the hardware in terms of system calls. So the user needs to just obey the API and understand what the OS will do as a result. Say for example, you have written printf, you know that it invokes the write system call, and what will be the output of printf must be known. Here you can see the diagram of how the user application calls the open function, moreover file read function, and appropriate system call is your open function, and this has been invoked with the help of system call interface, the user mode, and the kernel mode is it calls the open system call and returns the status to the user. So system calls, they occur in different ways depending upon the computer in use. The exact type and amount of information, they vary according to the operating system and the call. For example, in order to get an input, we may need a file or maybe a device as the source, as well as the address of the memory buffer. So we can use three methods to pass parameters to the operating system. The first or the simplest approach is pass the parameters in the registers, and in some cases, however, if there may be more parameters than registers. In such cases, you are supposed to use a table or a block. So this shows the way of parameter passing in terms of a table. If there are more parameters which cannot be held in registers, you are going to just load that address into a table. Load the parameters from table X to the operating system. The first type of system call is regarding process control. Let's say the user has created a new job or process. He must be able to control the execution, right? This control means we can reset the attributes of a job or a process with the help of system call, that is get or set process attributes. So as you know, whenever program is created, the OS has to create a process for that program. Yes, so that calls the create process system call, and in between, if that particular program has to wait for some amount of time, it has to invoke the wait time system call, and the program may also wait for some specific event to occur. In such case, the wait event system call can be triggered. The jobs of the process should then signal that the event has occurred. For that, signal event is another system call. So these system calls, they include acquire lock or release lock kind of facility, and after the program is loaded and executed, finally it has to terminate, right? So it invokes the end or end system call with the kind of status. Maybe the operation is successful, so it invokes the uh, corresponding status for that particular operation, or else it may indicate some error conditions saying that a particular file is not found, like that. So corresponding status or error messages must be displayed after the execution. So for that it requires certain system calls, and we can use the debugger for determining the bugs or for the single step execution. Next, for file management, this is the second type of system called file management, and the third type is device management. So in file management, first of all, whenever a file is created, it invokes the create file system call, and the system requires the name of the file and perhaps some kind of file attributes. So once the file is created, the operating system must open the file. So it invokes the open, and then after invoking this kind of functionality, the user can perform certain tasks like read or write or reposition to a particular content in the file. And if the file is not accessible, he or she can change the file attributes with the help of get file attributes to know the current attribute set for that file, and can set the file attributes. And third kind of system call is device management. As you know, a process may need several resources to execute, maybe main memory or disk drive, or it may need access to some files. So if the resources are available, usually it will grant it, and control will be returned to the user. Otherwise, what will happen is the process has to wait until the sufficient resources are available. Some of the devices may be the physical devices like a disk drive, and others can be thought of as a virtual devices like files, right? A system with multiple users may require to first request the device, right? If there are multiple users, first it has to request, it should identify, the operating system should identify who has requested access to the device, which user ID. Okay, once the access is done, it locks the particular control, and then the user can perform certain actions like read, write or reposition. Once the device has been requested, it can do all these operations like read, write, reposition, and then finally the user can get to know the device the attributes, and also set the device attributes, and that file can be mounted to another file system. So we have got another system call, that is information maintenance, system calls pertaining to information maintenance and communication. So information maintenance here, it means the attributes or the functionalities related to the system. Maybe to get the time or to set the time, appropriate system call is there, and also the system calls may return the information about the system like how many users are there in the system, and what is the version of the operating system used, how much amount of free memory is there. So for all these kind of tasks, appropriate system calls are available. And the program trace, you must have known about the program trace. So this program trace lists each system call as it's executed. Even the microprocessors provide the CPU mode known as single step, which you must have known about it. the single step in which a trap is executed by the CPU after every instruction. So this trap is called by the debugger. And there are other calls to set the process information or get the process information. The next kind of system call is communication. We follow the two common models for this inter-process communication, that is message passing model and shared memory model. So there are two types of communication in which the process executes. First one is about the message passing and second is shared memory model. So again in this we have got certain system calls, like first of all, to initiate a connection, it needs to create that particular connection, and then messages can be transferred to and fro. So it creates to actually create a channel. Depends upon the kind of model here used, that is message passing model or shared memory model. In shared memory model, the processes use a shared memory. That means if I say client and server, they try to access the shared memory. And associated system calls are used to create and gain access to the region. Usually the operating system tries to prevent one process from accessing another process's memory. So shared memory requires that two or more processes agree to remove this restriction. What do they do is they can exchange information by reading and writing data in the shared areas. So this is about the shared memory model. So in this message passing model, the communicating process, they exchange the messages with one another to transfer the information. You can observe that there will be several processes in the memory, and each one of the communicating parties will request the permission to access the region. You can see the word M there in each process location. So before communication, what do they do is they first of all connection must be opened and name of the other communicator must be known. So each computer in the network, as you know, it has an host name, and the host has also a network identifier like IP address. And similarly, each process has got a process name, and this name is again translated into an identifier. So again, this requires get host ID or get process ID system calls to do the translation, that is translation to IP address. So then once the identifiers are obtained, they are passed to the open and close calls, which are provided by the file system. So which will open the connection and close the connection for the particular communication. So you can see the difference between shared memory and message passing memory. In shared memory, both the processes they gain or access to a common shared memory. Whereas if in message passing, one process gain access to the region of the other process with communication in communication with the kernel. Here in message passing system, the sender process will make a particular module and send it to the receiving process module. Corresponding identifiers are passed, that is the process ID of the first sender along with the messages passed through in the communication channel, which is received by the receiving process, and the message module is being passed to the receiving process, and upon receive they can also acknowledge the sender. So this is the hierarchy of how the processes communicate while using shared memory as well as message passing method. So in shared memory method, as you know, processes use shared memory. They create and the shared memory create and shared memory attach kind of system calls to create and gain access to the region. So basically, what is the system call that is used to create and gain access to the region is shared memory create and shared memory attach system calls. And the main goal is to prevent one process from accessing another process's memory. So this kind of restriction is removed. So shared memory requires that two or more processes agree to remove this kind of restriction. Here you can observe two or process A and process B, they are accessing the shared memory. And simultaneous access is not performed here. And simultaneous write is not performed, and so that it is consistent data is maintained in case of shared memory. And in message passing kind of system or communication, we can have many system calls associated with it. That is, before communicating, the communicating parties must agree that they must share their IDs, and then after that the connection can be opened and the name of the other communicator must be known if they are on the same system. And each one of the process, like process A and process B, will have a host name or a host ID, or and it can be converted into an IP address, and then they can use several system calls for that kind of translation to convert the host name into IP address, like get host ID and get process ID. That will perform the translation, and the identifiers will be passed with the help of open and close system calls. And once the communication process is done, it calls the close system calls. So here let's see the difference between the shared memory model and the message passing model. In shared memory, the shared memory region itself is used for communication, whereas in message passing, the kind of message passing where each one knows the communicator, communicating parties is used for communication. And in shared memory, it is used for communication between the processes on a single processor, whereas in a message passing model, it can be used on a distributed environment where there are several different computers located on different locations and they are communicating on, maybe remote machines are communicating over the network. In shared model, the code for reading and writing the data from shared memory should be explicitly written by the programmer. Code for reading and writing must be explicitly written by the programmer, whereas in message passing model there is no such restriction. And in shared memory model there is a limit on the speed of the computation, whereas in message passing model it is time consuming as it takes any amount of time. In shared memory model, the processes need to ensure that they are not writing to the same location simultaneously. That is, no simultaneous write is possible within the same shared memory location. Whereas in message passing model, it can be used for sharing any amount of data, maybe small amount of data. And shared memory model is very fast in communication because all the common variables can be accessed directly. If there are 100 systems together can be given the same data. Whereas in message passing model, it is quite slower because it is point to point connection and each one has to be given the data that has to be read. So this is another service which is provided by the operating system. Protection provides mechanism for controlling the access to the resources provided by the operating system. So protection it was a concern not only in the multi-program systems, but if there are many users, that also will be a huge risk. System calls that will provide protection include like set permissions and get permissions. With these system calls, you can also understand the permission set by the particular user for different categories of users, and also the user can manipulate. That means he can set their own permissions for his own file. so as to maintain security. And there is another system called allow user and deny user system call, which specifies whether a particular users can or cannot be allowed access to the resources. In this way, protection is provided by the operating system. So this is a list of the comparison between Windows and Unix system calls. In Windows system, whenever the process is created, there is a system called create process invoked. And similar to that, we have got fork system call in Unix system. Likewise, there is after the process has wants to terminate. That means after the process has completed its job, it wants to terminate. It calls the operating system calls the exit process or terminate process system call. So similar to that, we have got exit system call in Unix system. And likewise, there are several calls you can observe. Several calls, system calls for process control, file manipulation, device manipulation, information maintenance, communication, and protection. So let's discuss about operating system structure. As you know, a system is large and complex as modern operating system. It needs to be properly functioned and modified easily so that the larger task can be partitioned into smaller components. So here the MS-DOS is taken into consideration. So this is an example of such a system wherein it was originally designed and implemented by few people who had no idea about how popular it would become. It was designed to have least space, so it was not structured as modules. So in MS-DOS, the interfaces and levels of functionality, they are not well separated. Here you can observe that there is free memory and there is a command interpreter and a kernel. At system startup, there is no process residing besides the one that is running in the kernel. And then during whenever a program is executed, it is brought into the memory. At a time only one program can be executed. So for that program, the OS creates a process, and that process will reside in the memory for execution. And therefore, it is a single tasking operating system. Let's see some of the features of MS-DOS. The interfaces and levels of functionality are not well separated. For example, if you take the application program, any application program, they are able to access even the IO routines and write directly to the display and disk drives. So what happens if the application programs, they are able to directly access the IO routines and write to the display? More than one user will be accessing over the system, right? And it causes inconsistent data. And if the user program fails, the same thing is reflected overall. So MS-DOS is also limited by hardware, right? So this is one kind of simple structure, MS-DOS, wherein only a single program can be used for execution. So this is about the second kind of operating system structure, which is a layered approach. Operating systems can be broken into pieces that are smaller. That is, here we have got n such layers. There is no predefined number of layers. There will be many layers, and the layer within, the most inner layer is your hardware, and layer 1 lies just above it. Then next we have got layer 2, layer 3, and so on. This is a way of modular approach. And one modular approach is nothing but a layered approach that we have considered now. So in this, the operating system is broken into number of levels, different levels or different layers, where layer 0 is the hardware and the highest layer is your user interface. In between, you can observe many such operating system services are executed. Memory management, input output, file management, and so on. So the layers are not just 3 or 4 or 5, there will be many such layers wherein the operating system works on. And the highest layer is your user interface, and the layer within, the most inner layer, is the hardware. The main advantage of this kind of layered approach is the simplicity of the construction. Simplicity of the construction and debugging. We can identify from which layer the error has occurred, right? So in this kind of layered approach, the layers will be selected in such a way that each uses the functions and services of the lower levels only. That means layer 1 can use the functions and services of only the layer 0. That means when layer 0 is completely tested, it is very clear that if there is any error occurring, it will be in layer 1 because layer 0 has already been tested. So the main advantage of such kind of approach is mainly debugging and simplicity in the construction, because you can just inherit what services which are used by the previous layers. So if the error is found during the debugging, the error must be on that layer because the layers below will already been debugged. So what is the major difficulty of this layered approach is defining various layers. That is the most difficult, because a layer can only use lower level layers. What will be the next layer has to be carefully planned because it is linked. So this is about a layered approach. In this third kind of operating system structure, that is microkernel, like as you can observe, the kernel is given to be, it is very small. Why? Because all the privilege instructions are scheduled only in the kernel area, thus making the kernel small, and the user program resides separately. So main functionality of this microkernel is to provide communication facility between the client program and the various services that are running in the user space. So how is the communication provided is by message passing. For example, if a client program wishes to access a file, it must interact with the file server, right? So the client program and the service, they usually never directly interact, right? They access the file server. Client program interacts with the file server requesting for a communication. So this communication will be by means of message passing. And in this microkernel approach, microkernel approach, the method structures the operating system by removing all non-essential components from the kernel. So microkernel is only responsible for the most important services. The major services which are performed by the microkernel include inter-process communication, memory management, CPU scheduling, so on. So the microkernels, what is the major benefit of microkernel is that is it can easily extend the operating system. So if new services are to be added, they are added directly to the user space without touching the kernel. So it will be the security can be imposed. When the kernel has to be modified, the changes will be quite fewer because this is a very small kernel and we can easily and this can be easily managed. So since it is very small, it can be easily portable, right? It can be ported from one hardware design to another. So this kind of approach provides more security and reliability. You might have heard about 264 Unix systems which provide Unix interface, but it is implemented with the Mac kernel. And this is about the microkernels, and these microkernel approach, they also suffer from performance decrease due to the system function overhead. And the last kind of operating system structure is about modules or a modular based approach. So here you can observe the Solaris operating system, which is divided into several loadable kernel modules organized around the core kernel module. There is a core Solaris kernel, and and it is jointly with the scheduling classes, file systems, loadable system calls, executable formats, streams modules, miscellaneous modules, device and bus drivers. So the kernel will have a set of core components and links in additional service either during booting time. So such a strategy will use loadable modules. So whenever it is needed, it will allow it into the execution phase. So this design allows the kernel to provide core services, also allowing certain other features. Whenever we want, it can be dynamically executed.